Welcome back, y'all. It is 5 a.m. and what better time to check out some fish tanks? By popular demand, we are doing a part 2 of the best and worst Betta fish tank ideas we can find on Pinterest. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So first off, here we've got a Betta in a blender. That's always a great tank. That's exactly what you want. Your typical blender is not even gonna hold a gallon of water. That Betta does not look like it has a lot of room to swim. And does this remind anybody else of the Joe cartoon from the 90s of the frog in a blender game? Yeah, not a fish tank. Not a fish tank. Negative 1,000 out of 5. Now this next one unfortunately does not have a lid, but oh my gosh, the aquascaping on this tank. Life goals. Serious life goals. I can only hope to one day be able to create a tank that is this beautiful. I really wish that it had more of a lid or at least more floating plants to keep the Betta from maybe being able to jump out of this tank. So I'm gonna have to give it a 3 out of 5 for not having a lid, but man, seriously, that aquascaping. So this one here, we've got a gumball machine. That poor Betta, that poor thing. That water is so cloudy. There's no room for much of anything in this thing. It doesn't even look like it's a half a gallon. This poor Betta. Guys, gumball machines, not fish tanks. Maybe if you got one of the giant monster-sized gumball machines, that could be pretty epic. But a little desk gumball machine that you can't even put real full-size gumballs in, not a fish tank. Oh, plus that water is just so dirty. Oh, that poor Betta. That poor Betta. Negative 1,000 out of 5. Here we have a Betta in a coffee pot. They have made a fish tank out of a coffee pot. Minimum tank requirements for a Betta is gonna be a 2.5 gallon, preferably with a heater, preferably not in a coffee pot. The only thing that really should be going in a coffee pot is coffee. I'll give them this. It looks like they did try and put a live plant in there. Seriously, this fish barely has room to swim. Negative 1,000 out of 5. And we're just not doing that much better on this one. So here we've got a vase. Here we've got kind of an aquaponics thing going on here with a vase with a very large plant growing out of it. I don't know how you would feed your Betta in this. This looks like it might be about a half a gallon to a gallon of water. And again, I don't even know how you would feed your Betta. So there's a lot of myths out there that I've heard about aquaponic tanks and planting them and that the plant will feed the Betta. Well, Bettas are insectivores. They need a very, very large amount of protein. They need a lot of protein in their diet or they will get sick. They cannot thrive on plant matter. If you are thinking about setting up an aquaponic tank, you still need to be able to give your Betta high protein food. They need to be on a high protein diet. They cannot live on plants. I don't know who started these myths that Bettas could live off of plants, but they can't. Negative 1,000,000 out of 5. This next one, oh my gosh, I think this would be like my life goals for a Halloween fish tank. This tank is creepy and dark and I kind of love it. I really kind of love it. It does have a heater. It looks like the tank has a lid, but it's kind of hard to tell in the picture. But it is a really nicely set up tank and it looks like it's got a heater and a filter in there. And I'm a sucker for all things Halloween. All things Halloween. And of course, it looks like plenty of space for the Betta to live in. It looks like it's probably at least a 5-gallon tank, maybe a little bit even larger. I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 5 and I love it. Oh my gosh. Seriously, this would be a great tank for Halloween. Next, we have a really nicely planted tank. The only thing that I have against this is there's no lid. It's beautifully planted. It's plenty spacious enough for the Betta. I can't tell if there's a heater. It does look like it has a filter, but there is no lid. So there would be a risk in this tank that the Betta might jump out, unfortunately, because this is a really, really nicely aquascaped tank, and I just wish it had a lid. I just wish it had a lid. 3 out of 5. Here we've got another wonderful aquaponic vase that, again, I don't know how you're supposed to feed your Betta when you've got the plant taking up the entire top of the vase. There's not a lot of space for this fish to swim around. This looks like it's probably maybe a half a gallon to a gallon. But I mean, it's tall. It doesn't have any width. Bettas need space to swim around. Fish in general need space to swim around. They're not a decoration. They are a living creature that needs space to be able to spread out and move around. It's just not fair to them. It's not fair to them to put them in this kind of an environment. -1,000 out of 5. Now this one I would say is probably the best attempt I've seen, or at least one of the best attempts I've seen at keeping a Betta in a fish bowl. I don't advocate putting fish in bowls, but this one is extremely heavily planted, and it looks like it actually is a pretty decent size. It looks like it's probably at least a 3 gallon. They did put a heater, they did put what looks like a sponge filter in the tank, so they at least made a really, really big effort to try to make this a decent environment for a Betta. Now, while I don't advocate using bowls, if you're going to try to set up a bowl, this is probably the best that you're gonna come up with. Unfortunately, the tank still does not have a lid, so there is a possibility of the Betta jumping out. So as far as bowls go, while I'm not a big fan of bowls and it does tend to distort a Betta's view, I'm gonna still give this a 2 out of 5 because you can tell a lot of effort was made to try to make a bowl a suitable environment. Well, the big thing about Bettas is that they need to be in a minimum of a 2.5 gallon tank. Bare minimum 2.5 gallon tank. Bigger is always, of course, better. If you can afford it and you have the space, a 100 gallon tank for a single Betta sounds fantastic. You also always want to make sure that your tank remains at a stable temperature of between 78 and 80 degrees, which means that most of us require putting a heater in our Betta's tanks. Bettas are also known to be jumpers, so you want to keep a lid on your tank to keep the Betta from accidentally ending up on the floor. Also, for most people out there, they don't want to have to do 50% water changes or more on a regular daily or every other day type of basis. Not many people want to do that kind of maintenance, so a filter is typically required, or you would need an extremely heavily planted tank, which would also act as a type of filtration for your fish tank. Bettas also do require a very high protein, high quality diet if you want them to live a long and healthy, happy life. So always keep these things in mind when you are purchasing or building or setting up your aquarium. So anyway, guys, that's all I really have for y'all today. As always, thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!